You're listening to Becoming More Me, and I'm your host, Teresa Lear Levine, here to help and guide you on the never ending journey of becoming. I've got to ask you, have you or a loved one ever had some health issues going on that have just stumped you, and none of the traditional answers or tests have been able to give you the answers that you were looking for? That kind of stuckness and stumpedness is what led me over the last 6 months to begin doing work with bioenergetics and alongside the help and guidance of Jason Persaud, who is my guest today. And I got to meet and bond with Jason earlier this year when I went on retreat in Chilliwack, British Columbia, did a few episodes on all of that, and learned a lot from him about the downward causation model, about quantum healing and quantum medicine, and bioenergetics. And he has a really unique approach. He's kind of known internationally as this sort of wizard and works with people from, babies to the elderly and all sorts of different challenges with health and optimization of health. And his unique approach combines science, energy, ancient healing wisdom to really create these profound shifts and these superhuman unlocks for people, and guides them through these complex health challenges. So he's really empowering us to reclaim harmony in a toxic world. And I think you're going to find a lot of life-changing wisdom and advice in today's episode as we go from learning about Jason to learning about how this sort of work can help you in your everyday life and beyond. I think there's a lot of wisdom to unlock here. So let's welcome Jason Persaud to Becoming More Me. It all starts now. Hey, Jason, I'm so glad you joined me today. Thanks for being here.
No problem. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we have so much that we can talk about. And, I've been working with you for the last few months and making a lot of breakthroughs with my health. And I think that maybe a good place to start is, first of all, to understand a little bit about who you are outside of the world of bioenergetics and all of the wizardry that you do. I would love to just hear how you like to spend your free time, maybe like what you like to drink in the morning, what your hobbies are, that kind of thing. Just tell us a little bit about you.
Ooh, okay. So I love to start my day with a huge bulletproof coffee, which I have right here. So if you see me sipping it, that's what I'm doing. I put all the goodies in it. I put like collagen. We put a little bit of bone broth in there. We put some colostrum, honey, lots of goodies. And for fun, I never used to be a snow person. I'm from Toronto, and like we don't really get good winters in Toronto, at least anymore. And I moved to British Columbia 3 years ago, and I love to snowmobile or sled, right? They call it sledding. I love to do that. Super fun. This year, I bought myself a sled bike, which is basically a dirt bike with a ski and a track on the back. So that's what I
Sounds
like
like
to do for
fun.
fun. Yeah. And then during the summer, I love downhill mountain biking and like basically any outdoor adventure, to be honest with you.
Very cool. And you live in a great place to do that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
awesome. And then I'd love to get into kind of how you got into what you do with bioenergetics and such. And we'll need to define that also for people who don't understand that
Yeah.
and want to understand more. But like, I believe it was your own like personal experiences, as it is with most of us, that lead into what we do career-wise,
Yeah.
and perhaps, trauma and health challenges that led you here. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so bioenergetics, just to define that, is basically the idea of looking at one's biology, which is, great time biology, what's going on inside the body. But what they don't teach us about in high school is the energetic body, right? Not really a concept we learned about. So basically, bioenergetic medicine is the idea of our biology and energy body combined. And anything going back into Eastern practices, such as traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, Ayurvedic, has a lot to do with our energy body, our emotional body, and how that plays into our physical health. Definitely the world that you play in. So, in relation to me, I got into this because of my own health issues. I was a bodybuilder, so I kind of took the physical health to an extreme, and that basically led to me, using steroids and kind of living that life. And that basically led to me having chronic IBS issues and, got me in a pretty dark stint of suicidal depression.
Mm.
Now, was that the only thing? No, later you come to learn find that all of that lifestyle stuff was layered on top of all this childhood emotional trauma, which, was perceived as just normal immigrant upbringing. But then you come to realize it's not so normal and its impact on the nervous system, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, I was kind of wading through life, so to speak. I didn't have any like chronic health issues. Of course, looking back, I was like, oh, that's not normal. That's not normal. That's not normal. And then eventually the extreme lifestyle of dieting and bulking during my days of bodybuilding basically led to me really, messing up my detox pathways, really messing up my gut health. And then with an already hot nervous system, it was just a train wreck waiting to happen. And I was in an interesting space of what we call the subclinical world. So because I was depressed, and so here's an antidepressant. And I was like, well, yeah, I know that's the case, but I also know my gut is messed up. But my gut wasn't bad enough for the medical system to basically play in the world of any sort of like steroids because I wasn't bleeding essentially. So the medical system didn't really have much for me except for antidepressants, and my blood work was relatively fine, aka I wasn't dying, but I was in immense amounts of pain on a regular basis, and I couldn't know what to eat and everything like that. So the medical system didn't really have any answers for me. I was like 22 at the time, so I did not have the money for functional medicine testing or like to go that route to even explore what was going on. But based on symptomology and what I had studied about holistic nutrition, I knew I was having some like gut dysbiosis, basically things like yeast, parasites, and mold. So I started trying to detox using coffee enemas and liver gallbladder flushes, and I would get myself feeling better, but I wouldn't really get myself like being better. I would feel better and then I would kind of shift back and I couldn't kind of break through that. And then eventually I found this holistic practitioner who had the same machine that I have now, called the Bioscan. And she was able to do some testing on me and basically was able to find all sorts of things going on in the body. And we took a functional medicine approach, just not using functional medicine testing, and basically started to work with the gut microbiome, the bioterrain, assessing what was in the bioterrain, and put the pieces together. And while alongside that journey, I also had a mentor who was a functional medicine doctor and a shaman. And so he introduced me to the world of energy and plant medicines. And that like completely blew my third eye open and shifted my perspective from there. And I was like, oh, it's all energy. And then I was able to kind of see the patterns that I was running, which was creating my health issues. And so it was like, yeah, I have to make these lifestyle changes, but if you don't shift the mental programs that are creating the lifestyle habits, then you're just like fighting a wiring within yourself, so to speak. And that was my big aha, I would say, but around the age of 25. And then I went back to school to study. I went back to school to Quantum University to basically study the science behind what I was doing for my health, essentially. And then I transitioned from the fitness industry more into the natural medicine industry, and that's where I live now.
Very cool. Very
Mm,
fascinating. And you like
mhm,
super healthy and seem to have reversed all of those issues
mhm.
through what you do. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
What would
Mhm.
you say that most people need to know or should know about bioenergetics and how it impacts their health on like a daily basis?
Yeah. So it's, regardless of what type of medicine we want to use for our health, I think at the end of the day, we all want to feel better and we all want to have a better impact on our energy levels and how we feel throughout the day. I think that the medicine of choice comes down to our belief system. Right. And so the way we look at the body. So in bioenergetic medicine, it's really we believe that we are a physical being and that physical being has a lot of energetic properties to it, especially emotional properties. And so bioenergetic medicine is just taking the whole human into account. We are going to look at the physical body, we're going to look at your emotional body, and we're going to pay attention to your mental body, aka the mental programs. Something like functional medicine, they don't really pay attention to anything to do with the energy body or emotional body, right? They're just dealing with like biochemistry or functional biochemistry. And then you have the medical system, which doesn't really care about all any of that per se. So, I would just say the way it impacts someone the most is that we're taking the whole human into account. For some humans, a lot of it is mental emotional, right? A lot of it is just they have a very hot nervous system due to trauma, and we need to support them that way. Other people, it's more simple, so to speak, and it's more lifestyle, aka you're drinking too much alcohol on the weekends and you're having too many cookies, and we got to clean up your microbiome. So I think anyone that practices or sees a practitioner in the world of bioenergetics, really is working with a practitioner that is just taking the whole human into account. And with that being said, there are practitioners that within the world of bioenergetics that can specialize more in the mental emotional or specialize more in the bioterrain, microbiome world, which is kind of where I live most of my time, right? I spend a lot of time there. And then, if I had someone more mental emotional, I would refer them to someone like you or my wife. And that's how we create the team dynamic for what people need.
Yeah, that's so important. And I know I was picking up on a lot of aha moments. We met and bonded at a retreat back in May, and
Yeah.
you shared a lot of your knowledge and wisdom with us there. And just little basic things like thinking about like how we absorb or don't absorb water hit me
Yeah.
in a way where I was like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, like maybe the fact that I'm like up a time or two a night going to the bathroom isn't actually because I've had four children. Like there are like just these like little things like that. Can you elaborate on like water absorption or just those like basic aha things that like most people aren't thinking about?
Yeah, yeah. I think my go-to is talking about basically how we absorb water, pooping and sleeping. So if we have an animal, we have a pet or we have a child, we pay attention to the basics, such as like, are you drinking enough water?
Sure.
Are they peeing too much? Are they pooping regularly and are they sleeping well? Right? Those are the basics. And regardless of any living being, those pieces need to work. Unfortunately, as we get older, for a plethora of reasons. Basically, we lose the ability to sleep restfully through the night. Some people lose the ability to absorb water if they're even drinking water, because most people don't drink water. And on the absorption front, the idea is something called left spin. So imagine you're drinking water and an hour later you got to pee. Right? How many people do we know like that? Basically, you're like a plant with no soil. Your body is not actually absorbing that water and it's just running right through you. And there could be a few reasons. It could be water quality. Like are we drinking a lot of like bottled water that's full of microplastics? Are we drinking tap water, which has a plethora of other things in it?
Sure.
Or are we drinking reverse osmosis water, which, although is very clean, has no minerals in it, unless it's a RO system with remineralization. So
Right.
there's a few factors when it comes to water. Water is supposed to be clean, it's supposed to have minerals, and it's supposed to be structured. Because if we were drinking water from any stream or river or anything of the sort, it's moving and therefore it's structured. Unfortunately, a lot of the water that we drink is still water, so it's not structured, and that affects our body's ability to actually absorb it, therefore making us feel hydrated, essentially. So many people who are just in left spin, it's basically just running right through them. So I always tell people, get a filter. Something like Santivia, clearly filtered as a pitcher. Like there are filters out there that are not super expensive, like $50, $60 range. And you just want to make sure you're really remineralizing your water. Yes, there's more stages you can go up. Reverse osmosis water is technically your best option because it takes everything out of the water, but you have to remineralize it. Because if that's not the case, water is going to run right through you. Now, if you already are drinking filtered water and mineralized water, but you still feel like it's running through you, then you might be in something called left spin. And left spin is basically talking about the cell's ability to absorb water. Okay. And that can happen just from chronic stress and emotional distress. The other thing would be hypothalamic dysregulation. So, because of the same stress that we just talked about, the hypothalamus can become dysregulated. And this could be from an event that happened when you were like 13. Say you saw something traumatic and the breaker on the hypothalamus turned off and it just never quite comes back on. And this is where people stay in that heightened depressive or anxious state. And we need to have, this is where we go into the world of like therapy or emotional help or energetic help because we need help getting the nervous system back to home base. But we can test for that in bioenergetics. And oftentimes I see that with any sort of chronic symptomology. And the reason the hypothalamus is super important is because it regulates autonomic function. So that's going to be anything to do with water absorption, anything to do with detoxification, blood pressure, hunger, like all of the basics, And so until we get that regulated, we might see chronic issues persisting to happen, even though you're doing the thing that should be fixing it, quote unquote. So yeah, I know I went a little long there, but
No, that was perfect. Thank you. I appreciate all that advice there. Um, we tend to have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are like high achieving individuals, entrepreneurs, professionals that definitely find it more challenging to prioritize their health, even if they are in the realm of health coaching. It's the paradox there.
yeah.
So, what kind of practical advice would you give to start improving health and energy levels from that space?
I think it's a decision, to be honest. Like at the end of the day, it's always a decision.
Mm,
So we're always going to be busy. There's always going to be things going on. I think anyone that is a high achieving business person always is focused on the world of business and income and impact. And sometimes we lose ourselves along the way. And there was a principle that Paul Chek taught me years ago. It's the I, we, all principle. Basically, you have to take care of the I, to take care of the we, to take care of the all. And, just like we have the rest of our world scheduled, we have to schedule ourselves into the calendar. I know it sounds really basic, but that's probably as
I preach it.
practical as you're gonna get, just book in your own meeting with yourself for
First, before you book the
yeah,
other stuff.
totally. Like that is the recurring calendar schedule, right? It's your workout, it's your yoga class, it's your meditation, it's your like sauna cold plunge, like whatever it is, it's in the calendar recurring. And if you did that at least for the first like month, that sets a habit pretty darn quick and you start to feel good. And, it just brings you back to center and it just brings you back to center so you can reevaluate, is this working? Is this not working? Because sometimes we just, and I'm victim of this too, we get stuck in this like hustle and grind. Like I just did a Toronto trip and usually I do like 5-day trips and they're just like, 6, 7, 8 people a day, 5 days in a row. And my most recent trip, I did 7 days, and that way I can kind of spread the client load out over a couple more days. And that equated that, allowed me to basically go for dinner with different friends, old friends from Toronto, 5 nights in a row. Which was awesome. So I was like, okay, I worked and then I filled my cup at night and had a good time. And then went back to work the next day. And it felt so much better on my nervous system. I didn't feel fatigued by the end of the trip. And I didn't hate going there, which sometimes
Mm,
does when it's just like a long work trip, and you didn't really feel
yeah,
like you did anything but work.
it just feels like an obligation.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I think the calendar is our most from a high performing entrepreneurial business person. Like I work by my calendar.
Yeah.
The wife wants my time has to be in the calendar, at least during the workday.
Get
Like
that
it's
in there
just
first, Jason.
well, it's just like not that. We're other things, other tasks. But yeah, it just has to get into the calendar. That's it. And so that would be
My
probably the
mind
most
wasn't
practical.
even there. We just made an
Uh,
assumption. You just know me well enough that you assumed my mind was there.
yes,
It wasn't.
I I think it was a fair assumption.
It was a fair assumption. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, and I love that decide comes from like the Latin roots of it means to cut off. So like when you are making a
Mm,
decision, it really is like you're cutting off those things that don't matter and really
yeah.
focusing on what does at the end of the day. So I love that. So
Yeah.
you mentioned and we experienced a little bit of this together when we were together, like about like plant medicines and things like that, and how that kind of
Yeah.
blew up in your third eye and was
Yeah.
such a big like awakening for you. And I,
Mhm.
hand in hand with probably spiritual practices. So how do like spiritual practices and plant medicines fit into like physical and energetic healing? And are there any
Yeah.
specific practices that you recommend?
Yeah. So We follow a philosophy or a framework called the downward causation model. Okay. And it's basically a quantum physics model that describes, who we are as beings on this planet. Okay. So to be a human, we have a physical body. And I want you to picture that at the bottom of the waterfall. Okay. Or imagine a waterfall in your head. So we got physical body at the bottom. Above the physical bodies, our emotional body, the world of our feelings. Okay. You can think about chakras in this category. And then above that, we have the mental body. And the mental body is the conscious and subconscious mind. So those are the patterns that we are thinking that create the feelings, right, in our emotional body, which over time can show up in our physical body. If you get anxious, your heart rate goes up, right? Emotions can lead to things in the body. Now, above all of those is what we call the spiritual body, because the spiritual body or bliss body has a lot to do in our belief systems, right? If you ever met a religious person, right? They are very religious and that's their belief system. You met an atheist, very different way of being, So our spiritual belief or faith belief can completely change the wiring of our conscious and subconscious mind, therefore our emotional body, therefore our physical body, right? So when it comes to how all of these pieces tie together in relation to plant medicines.
Have you joined the Becoming More Me community over on School, one of the fastest growing learning platforms without distractions and ads? If no, I'd love to see you there. My community is full of amazing, busy-minded entrepreneurs who are working on becoming who they feel called to be in this world, in life, in business, with their health, with their wealth, with their relationships, and doing it in a way that's fun and pleasurable. I have over $15,000 worth of actionable resources, things you can start using and implementing today, as well as all the information that you need if you're interested in small group coaching, one-on-one work, or any of the other services that I have to offer you, including the Becoming More Me with EFT program. Hop on over to school, skool.com/discovery. Type in my name, join the community, and I cannot wait to welcome you there.
We're focusing on what's happening at the top. So if anyone's ever had like a near-death experience or something very traumatic happen, their life can be very different moving forward, right? We call that, sometimes for the better. If it's for the better, we call it a quantum leap. If it's for the worse, we call that trauma, okay? But all it is a complete shift in perspective, right? A complete shift in like, imagine we're going from, a dull gray day to now I have like pink sunglasses on. It's like, oh, wow, the world is completely different. And for the world of plant medicines, that was my experience. That was my wife's experience. That's many people's experiences in the world of PTSD and trauma, the world of military vets. There's lots of everyday people doing it these days or using that form of medicine. And basically, in the world of psilocybin, specifically MDMA and ketamine, it is shown to create something called neurogenesis, which is rewiring brain waves and patterns. When you get into the world of psilocybin, less of the MDMA and ketamine, it does have it's completely natural, first of all, and it does have this very medicinal, spiritual approach to it. MDMA and things like ketamine, I think, are a little bit more synthetic and like chemical based. And so I wouldn't say they have as much of a spiritual energy to it per se, but it does have the ability to help rewire the brain. So, when it comes to people that are stuck in PTSD states and they're trying to meditate and they're trying to journal and they're trying to do the practices in order to rewire the brain and it's not working, sometimes we need deeper forms of medicine, what we call medicine, in order to help rewire the brain. But it's an interesting combination because I've had a lot of clients. I don't say a lot, but I've had clients. I'm thinking we all know the person that's like, oh, they're doing plant medicine ceremonies all the time, and it turns into this kind of like chasing effect, as if medicine is going to fix your world, and it's like that's not the case. I know some people that have symptomology and they're chasing plant medicines and it's like you're just toxic, like you need to detox the body. And so it's this interesting blend of knowing what layer is important. And so out of my clinical experience, what I've seen is if there aren't emotional and energetic roots in the body in its relation to symptomology, it'll get better, right? Whatever we're working on, hormone issues, skin issues, whatever it is, it'll get better. If we're working on the body and a symptom isn't getting better, there's generally something emotional or energetic holding them back. And because it's higher in the totem pole, it kind of takes over. So if you're someone who feels stuck, with where you are in life, if you feel stuck
I think
and
everybody's been there at one point or another.
you feel like you have exhausted the world of spiritual practices, the meditation, the journaling, different forms of talk therapy, and you've really given a fair effort to work on your physical body, then that's when plant medicines can really be like powerful. So the way that me and my wife kind of build it into our practice in our world is, they clients have to go through the physical stuff with me. They have to go through the mental emotional coaching before you're well, more or less invited to come to a retreat where, you can sit with psilocybin. And we also use very, very small doses relative to what most people do. We kind of play in the world of like, 1.5 to like 2.5 grams versus a lot of people are doing crazy macro doses, which is completely unnecessary because we're looking to shift the mind, not blow it wide open, so chasing these massive plant medicine ceremonies, down in Peru or other places, I just feel like are unnecessary. They're unnecessary in the long run. In the short run, you can feel like you really need to shift, but you have to look at all the layers and put all the layers together. And when you start working on all the pieces, you'll find that you don't have to blow your third eye open as hard in order to start to make some changes.
Yeah, for sure. So would you say that psilocybin is like your favorite to work with?
That's my favorite. Like we primarily work with Cambo and psilocybin. If anyone, like honestly, even microdosing, I've had amazing results with people just simply microdosing, right? A microdose is anywhere in the 50 milligram to like 150 milligram range, depending on how large or small of a human you are or how sensitive you are. And I've had amazing results where it's like, we are able to get them, off their antidepressants or their anxiety meds, or, people are super creative and they don't have to be using things like Adderall or Ritalin or whatever they're using to try to focus. I've had some clients where like, we did like a 10-day dose and it completely changed their brain wiring just from those 10 days, and they didn't even have to continue after that because it's just creating neurogenesis. It's just
Yeah.
like it's shifting the brain waves, and the game is figuring out what is going to do it for that person. And I find that people that are less persuasive or less gullible, so to speak, like they're just more rigid in their nervous systems, can sometimes need plant medicines to like help them see their own stuff versus like, someone else who's more persuasive might be more open to things like NLP or hypnotherapy and things of that nature. And I say that because I'm one of those people that are very hard-headed and rigid, or was, I should say. So I am not as suggestible and needed something like that. The ceremony that really blew my third eye open was a ayahuasca ceremony. So the active ingredient is DMT. So that was the thing that really woke me up, so to speak. But whether it's Bufo, whether it's Aya, whatever medicine that feels good for you, we play in the world of psilocybin because it's very gentle, and we specifically don't go into those like stronger medicines, and it's also harder to access. It's usually like a Peru type of thing, unless you can find a business that identifies as a church here in North America, and that would be their sacrament. But yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
So the word quantum's come up a few times, and I know the
Yeah.
quantum field is a big part of like kind of some of the testing that you do and everything else.
Mhm.
Can you just like make that I don't think I've ever actually like defined that or talked about that on the podcast. So can we like talk
Yeah.
about quantum a little bit?
Yeah, quantum.
Yeah.
So I think we have to understand the perspective between quantum and Newtonian. Okay, so we got quantum physics and then we have Newtonian physics. So Newtonian physics is basically the law of thermodynamics as put forward by Albert Einstein, right? And he basically understood or came to conclude these specific rules because they always worked. And then there was these other things that he didn't quite understand, and so he just left them out, to be honest. Like he just didn't understand how they worked. anything to do with space-time is quantum physics. Okay. So for anyone who thinks quantum is not real, then literally you think outer space isn't real. Okay. It's just a completely different metric of physics as it pertains to what's happening here on Earth. Newtonian physics and the law of thermodynamics is the model through which the medical system operates off of. Okay. Everything to do with blood chemistry, everything to do with, yeah, basically blood chemistry and everything to do with the metabolites of our body. When you get into the world of what we call quantum physics, that's everything that one would call like the woohoo, anything to do with emotions or energy, or, imagine having a Taoist medicine doctor feel your pulse and then tell you all the things that happened to you in your life. It's like, how did they do that? And like, how did they pick that up? How does someone just put their hands over you in a Reiki session and tell you exactly what you're feeling in your body? Like that is the quantum. Okay. The other ideologies are things like quantum entanglement. So that might be the idea of, you become close with somebody and you're thinking about them and then boom, you get a text message, right? Quantum entanglement, right? How we are entangled with people who we interact with.
Yeah.
And then there's other ideologies, such as, you can have three of the same plants in the same room and a monk, Taoist monk, meditating on one of the plants to grow faster, the other one sending negative energy to like die, so to speak. And all these things are measurable and trackable just based off of intention. Okay. There is the work of Dr. Emoto. Basically, he had all these different glass jars filled with water and put different intentions and emotions into each individual glass, and then froze them. And we saw completely different crystalline structures based off of that.
Such a
The
cool
work of
experiment.
crazy. And that's old. Like that's from like the
Right.
80s. The work of Veda Austin. She's kind of, if I was gonna have a comparable to Dr. Emoto, it would be Veda Austin. I think she's from New Zealand, and she's basically doing all these crystallography studies right now. And basically, she'll hold, a plate with a little bit of water up to something for a few minutes, or put an intention to it, or whatever, and then freeze it, and it will hold the image of whatever was up against, such as like a tree or a leaf or whatever. It's
Very
quite
cool.
quite incredible, quite incredible. If you check out her page, Veda Austin,
Yeah.
you'll
I
see
haven't
you'll
seen
see a
those
lot
yet.
of this. Yeah, you'll see a lot of it. And what her work is basically showing us is that our memory banks are not in our brain. Our memory banks are in our fascia. They're in our water. They're in us. They're within the body, and they're easily accessible at any point in time once we can release wherever they're locked up within the body. And that's the world of quantum. So when it comes to testing specifically, there's obviously different forms of testing. I love to play in the world of frequency testing because it's the most cost effective for clients. And I honestly find I get way more information than if I was doing just blood testing, to be completely frank. So, I can test clients in person, or I can use hair samples. So when I run a hair sample, most people think, chop up the hair, put it in some sort of like liquid, spin it, and then like analyze it. Okay. That is not what is happening. So with the bioscan, it's a frequency machine. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm bringing the hair sample into the plate or into the system, and then I am basically using myself as like a surrogate in order to test that client. And because the hair is attached to you.
Hey, let's take a quick break from the episode and chat about the Becoming More Me signature program. Because the truth is, we can digest information and learning all day long, whether it's podcasts, books, audiobooks, courses. But ask yourself if it's really changing the way that you're showing up in your life. I know that for me, I felt like a collector of information for a very long time, and it wasn't until I started implementing nervous system regulation, and it wasn't until I started implementing nourishment of my nervous system and rewiring of my subconscious that I felt like I could really leverage that information to show up differently in my life. And that's why I created the Becoming More Me signature program, which allows me to work with clients in both one-on-one and group settings so that they can start showing up differently in their lives and actually creating and manifesting their desired outcomes like never before. If this is something that sounds even remotely interesting to you, I invite you to hop on a call where we're not even going to talk about you joining the program. We're just going to talk about you, and we're going to talk about what it is that you want out of your life and business right now. And I'm going to offer you some free, no strings insights on how you can start making those changes and take things from there. But it's always good to start with getting to know each other. So if that sounds interesting to you, and if the idea of perhaps looking further into a program like this might appeal to you now or in the near future, then hop over to gamechangingconversation.com, book a time, and we'll get to know each other. And this will help you to understand if something like this is going to be right for you moving forward. And the worst case scenario is you're going to walk away from this call with several things you can start doing right away to start getting closer to the changes you desire the most. Now back to the episode.
I'm testing you in your current state when I'm doing the test versus testing you when you took the hair sample, right? So through the idea of quantum entanglement and non-locality, I get instant results on what's happening with your body in that point in time versus when you took the hair. And I can use the same hair sample, I would say up to like 4 to 6 months. And then at that point, I find I want a new hair sample because it kind of loses the connection to the person. I would say there's also a deep work on my part, being the person who's doing the testing, to be able
Sure.
to focus in on your energy and, like your field and put all those pieces together. Because I feel like any Joe Blow who hasn't actually practiced this kind of work would get all sorts of results, right?
Right.
So there's definitely, and that's why we call it the healing arts. Okay, bioenergetic medicine is the healing arts. Any sort of energetic medicine is an art form. Our art form relates to natural medicine and someone's health. Someone else might be painting a canvas, and so I find that the other thing that I could say, the work that I do with a device or machine is very similar to the work of muscle testers, right? There's
Right.
muscle testers who test in
Analogy.
person. I have a colleague who's a muscle tester who doesn't need a machine, and he just will muscle test with someone else and tap
Yeah,
into that
use
person's
fingers or
field. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's as if you're doing fingers or if you're doing dowsing. It's the
yeah.
same. It's all the same thing, right? We're just listening to the body's um, nervous system, autonomic nervous system. And we have this ability to, if we're going to use the word channel, we have this ability to do this. And it's just forgotten, So it's been forgotten so far that if you do that, you're living in the woohoo, But when you get sick enough and nothing else works, all of a sudden the woohoo starts to make some sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I know you've been a great help to me and my family this year and everything else. You've been helping me with issues with, perimenopause and, stubborn weight and a lot of
Mhm.
other things. What are some of the things that you generally help people with? Or is it just so diverse from end to end that there's not really a specific thing?
I would say, yeah, it's so diverse. Like we're working from 6 month olds all the way to 80-year-olds, to be honest.
Yeah.
I have like the other day, on my Toronto trip, I had a fertility case I'm working on. We have a prostate cancer. Like it just completely varies. Kid with eczema, like it completely varies. I have another kid that was having, chronic bronchitis and pneumonia symptoms and nervous system tics, and a year later they're all gone. No more puffer use. So it
Yeah.
completely varies. What I will say, the common trend of any client is they're stuck in some capacity. What they have tried hasn't worked, and they're looking for a different way. That is the common trend through all clients. And so the reason that I can work with such a range of clientele and such a range of conditions is because at the end of the day, we all are humans. right? We all have genetic differences based on our lineage. We all have different epigenetics based off of our lifestyle. And we all have different emotional patterns based off of our individual upbringings and family dynamics. But we're all humans with the same organ systems, the same microbiome. And so it becomes kind of the same, to be honest. It's like, oh, you got liver problems. Oh, you have adrenal problems. Like the organ system dysfunction shows up the same for many people, but the reasons for it can be completely different. So I can have a hormonal, let's say, menopause client. I can have a menopause client with crazy hot flashes because she's not methylating and full of heavy metals. I can have another menopause client who has crazy hot flashes just because she's been constipated for 40 years and her colon and her liver are super backed up.
Okay.
I can have another one with crazy hormone symptomology because she was a nurse and, had two jobs or worked shift work and just burnt her adrenals and her nervous system. And now she's going through hormonal shifts and her nervous system's on fire. So here we have the same symptomology and three completely different reasons, but the process we do allows us to see all of those reasons, right? So
Right.
I can very quickly start to navigate like, oh, yeah, we see microbiology, heavy metals, and viral load. Or there's no viral load, you're just burnt out because you haven't taken care of yourself. So once we start to see that, then we go into, okay, what are the thought patterns that created this lifestyle which led to this condition? Because
Yeah.
if we don't fix that, then it's much more difficult to change. And that's where the world of, any sort of energetic or emotional coaching comes in because you're working with the psyche of the mind. And if this is that really the person's thought pattern, or is it a learned thought pattern from childhood, or is it just a trauma response, essentially?
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for everything that you've shared. If people want to learn more about this, where is the best place for them to find you or to do that?
Yeah, so going to just my Instagram right now is probably the best place. Jason Persaud bioenergetics. Pretty easy. That's where you're going to find anything that I'm up to, anything that I'm doing. We do have a group program launching in December, and it's going to be on the Circle app, and it's going to have basically everything I'm talking about laid out, step one, two, three, to get you started on your journey, things you need to start paying attention to. There you'll be able to access things like bioenergetic testing, blood testing, functional medicine testing, anything that you may need to start to gather information on what's going on with your health and then what to do with it. And so we'll have, free options, community options, and then of course you can access one-on-one options if that's what you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave people with?
Just really pay attention to all the layers of the body. Okay, like all those four layers, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, are the keys to health and vitality. And if you don't focus on all of them, generally something is going to show up either in your mind space, emotional space, or in your physical body.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And for all of you who are listening, I know you have so many choices when it comes to the podcast you choose. Thank you for listening to Becoming More Me. Get out there, go check out Jason's Instagram page. And Jason, thank you so much for being here today.
No problem. You're welcome.
Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.